Amen. Well, this morning we're going to continue in our series with questions about heaven. Questions about heaven that we have been asking. This is our 6th week and our final week in this series with our questions about heaven. Today, we're going to, am I a little too loud? Is that, can maybe we come down just a little bit? Thank you. I appreciate that. If I'm too loud, it distracts me. I can't imagine what it does to y'all. So today we're going to continue or finish up this series asking some of the most famous or most commonly asked questions that we might have about heaven. And this first one might not sound super important, but I think it's something that we might think about from time to time. So our opening question today is this: will we eat and drink in heaven, or will we play sports in heaven? Will we eat? Will we play sports? Like, what kind of things are we going to do? I just found out with you guys a few minutes ago about this fried chicken we're about to have. That was news to me. I'm excited about that. I love to eat. I love to eat good food. And when I say good, I don't mean healthy. I mean tastes good. Unfortunately, the two don't ever seem to be one and the same. But I love to eat food that tastes good. But also, like many of you, I'm concerned about what it does to me long term. So often we say things like this: man, when I get to heaven, I bet I could eat an entire cheesecake and not gain a single pound. Anybody ever said something like that? I bet we could eat chocolate all day long and it's going to be good for us in heaven. Or when I get to heaven, no more Diet Coke, I get to drink the real thing. You know, I can drink whatever I want, eat whatever I want in heaven. But is that true? Are we going to be able to eat and drink in heaven? Are we going to be able to eat things without it affecting us physically? Because for many of us, we say, I've heard people say this: well, I don't think we're going to eat at all in heaven because we eat food for fuel, right? We need protein, we need those carbohydrates, we need to give ourselves energy, and the only reason we eat is so that we can have energy. And we're not going to need that in heaven because our bodies are never going to tire. We're not going to need to drink water or Gatorade because we're not going to sweat and wear out. We're not going to need to replenish anything. So I've heard some say, I don't think we're going to eat at all in heaven. Forget the cheesecake and chocolate and Coke. We're not going to have to worry about any of that stuff. But is that true? Well, here's the thing. The Bible tells us in Revelation 19 that there is going to be an event called the marriage supper of the Lamb. It has the word supper right in the title. I believe we're going to eat in heaven. I believe this is going to be a literal feast. In fact, after the resurrection, in his perfect glorified body, Jesus ate while he was on earth. In the book of Luke, chapter 24, Jesus goes to the disciples, and they're fishing, and he says, would you give me some of that fish? And he took it, and he ate it. In Acts chapter 10, Peter was speaking about Jesus after the resurrection, and Peter says he ate and drank in our presence. So in his perfect body, one that would not wear out or tire, Jesus both ate and drank. When he wanted fish, he ate fish. To me, that's exciting news. To say when we get to heaven in our perfect bodies, we're not going to eat because we have to. I think we're going to eat, frankly, because we want to. Don't we enjoy eating? When we get together, what do we say? Well, let's go out and have a cup of coffee sometime. Or, hey, let's go out, let's discuss this over dinner. When we get together with families at things like Thanksgiving, the more food, the merrier, right? Everybody brings their best dishes. So much of our relationships are centered around food. And I don't think it's going to be any different in heaven. I think we're going to, maybe you'll show up at my mansion or I'll come to yours, and maybe you'll bring over some cookies, maybe I'll bring over a pumpkin pie, and we'll sit down and we'll have coffee and we'll talk. I don't think there's any reason to think that we won't do these things in heaven. I think we're going to do it and enjoy it so much more. We're not going to say, well, I better stop after just one cookie. No, we're going to say, give me the whole dozen. I mean, you brought them over. I don't want to send you home with leftovers. That would be rude. Well, let's eat them all up. I think in heaven we're going to be able to do these things because we enjoy it. But now we can think about things like this. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve ate before sin. Food is not something that God introduced because bodies began to wear out and God said, well, I guess they need to get fuel somehow. Let's invent protein. No, Adam and Eve ate before they ever sinned. So to me, there's no reason to think that we won't eat after sin. In their perfect state, Adam and Eve ate from that tree of life. And the very tree of life from which they ate is in heaven now, and we will one day eat from that same tree. The book of Revelation says that this tree of life will give healing to the nations, that there will be new fruit every month. That's going to be fun, isn't it? I mean, talk about variety. You know, you got an apple tree, which is great that it gives you apples, but it's only apples all the time. How cool will it be if today's apples, next month it's a pear tree, and the month after that there's avocados or something on there? Who knows? Whatever it is you want to eat. In heaven, I don't know if we're going to eat tons of cheesecake without gaining a pound. I mean, we're being a little bit facetious here. But I do believe that we're going to have the freedom to eat the things that we want to eat in heaven. Some of you are gluten-free down here, but you'll be free to eat gluten up there. Some of you have peanut allergies, and you're going to have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich when you get to heaven. I mentioned avocados. I am deathly allergic to avocados. If you ever want to take me out, slip me some guacamole. I promise you it'll do the trick. If I can't even touch avocados without an anaphylactic reaction, but in heaven I'm going to eat guacamole to the glory of God, and I'm going to say, this is an act of worship that I can eat this thing that is growing here, that God has given to us for food. Man, I think the food in heaven is going to be incredible. I think it's going to taste great. But what about meat? We like eating meat. I mentioned chicken a minute ago. Man, we eat meat. I love seafood. I love shrimp. I love crab and lobster. I love whatever's actually in sesame chicken. I mean, I'm not picky. I got some looks on that. I doubt it's chicken, but whatever. It tastes good. You put it in that sauce, it's fantastic. But I love to eat meat. Will we eat meat in heaven? Because in order for us to eat meat, an animal has to die. Adam and Eve did not eat meat in the Garden of Eden. God told Adam, you will take care of the animals and you will eat the fruit from the trees. Take care of the animals and eat the fruit. It is not until after the flood, the first time we are told that mankind could eat meat. God said, I'm now giving you every living thing as food for you. As you ate from the plants, now you can eat from the animal kingdom. So before sin, people didn't eat animals because nothing died. In heaven, are we going to be able to eat a juicy burger? That would mean a cow's going to have to die, right? So I don't know. I just don't know the answer to this. Will there be meat in heaven? I don't know. But I do believe that there's a God that could make some kind of substitute that could taste like the real thing. Even if there's not meat, even if we're not going to kill cows in heaven for steak and burgers, I believe God could put it on the menu somehow if he wants to. He rained down manna for 40 years. Could he not give us meat without killing a cow? I think with God, anything's possible. Anybody ever had a meat substitute, a plant-based meat? Has anybody ever tried one of those things? Show of hands, come on. All right. Now show of hands. Anybody like those things? All right. It was about a 50% decrease. We went from 2 to 1. So I've never had the Impossible Whopper from Burger King, but I did about a year ago. I had a plant-based burger purely out of curiosity. And I ate the whole thing, but I didn't really like it. I was like, this is not real hamburger, I can tell. But if you want to do that, if it's a healthy alternative, go for it. Now, in heaven, could God do an even better job of giving us plant-based meat? Could God give us things to eat? Look, here's what I've been saying throughout the series. God will not underwhelm us in heaven. No one's going to sit around saying, I thought there'd be shrimp in heaven. This stinks. No, God is going to blow our minds with what there is in heaven. So the food that we eat, I believe we're going to eat. I believe that we're going to drink water, Coke, whatever it is that you want to drink. I believe that we're going to have those things in heaven. But what about athletic activity? Are we going to play sports in heaven? Because I love sports. I mean, I even have my Florida Gator tie on. I've never worn this tie before, but I wanted to wear it. The Gators didn't play yesterday, so I didn't want to wear it after a win. We had the week off, but I love sports. I love to watch sports. I love to play sports. Are we going to do those things in heaven? I've heard some people say this, well, we're not going to do that in heaven because every swing of the club's going to be a hole-in-one. It's going to get kind of boring. Every swing of the bat's going to be a home run. Every pass is going to be a touchdown. That's going to be boring. By that logic, if every swing of the bat is a home run, wouldn't every pitch from the pitcher be so good that the batter couldn't hit it? Wouldn't the defense be so good that the offense couldn't score? It would really be a stalemate, wouldn't it? I don't think that heaven means that our perfection means that we're not going to have any room for improvement in sports. If to you going to heaven and having a glorified body is all about hitting hole-in-ones, I think you're missing the point of what our glorified bodies are about. They're about bodies that will be free from sin and imperfection, bodies suited for eternity to worship the Lord. Not just about never hooking a golf ball or never missing a jump shot. I believe there will be athletic competition in heaven. Competition normally entails winners and losers. And some say, well, there can't be any losers in heaven. Says who? We don't like to lose down here, but wouldn't losing in heaven be completely different than losing on earth? We lose down here, we might lose our temper. We lose down here, it might ruin our whole day. I believe we can lose in heaven and look at our opponent and say, hey, great game, you got the better of me today, without it bothering us. I believe we can have winners and losers and competition in heaven. Now, this is not a Bible verse I'm looking at, but it's just something to think about. If there's competition in heaven, it will only be friendly competition. There'll be no need for referees. We're not going to have fights break out. We're not going to have sore losers or poor sportsmanship. But I believe that we will be able to push our bodies to the max and say, these are the bodies that God has given us. Let's see what they can do. And I believe that we will be able to run and not tire, that we will be able to engage in activity, and it will be an act of worship because we'll be saying, God, this body that you've made is incredible. Look what all it can do. You wanted to be like Mike in the 90s. You wanted to run faster and jump higher, so you had to buy his shoes to do it. Man, I believe God's going to give us a body in heaven that we're going to be able to blow away the best of athletics down here on earth. So I believe that we're going to be able to have a good time in heaven, playing sports, eating and drinking, and I believe it's going to be a good time. Our next question, though, this one's a little bit more serious than our first question, but will I remember everything from earth? Am I going to remember everything? See, this creates a dilemma for us because on the one hand, we want to have our memories intact. When I go to heaven, I want to remember you, and I want to remember me, and I want to remember our relationship. You know, it was a tough week for us as a church as we lost Miss Betty Davis as she's gone on to heaven now. But I believe one day in heaven, Rick, I'm going to see your mom there, and I'm going to say, hey, Miss Betty, you see that pond over there? You remember that time when I baptized you when you were 97 years old? That still to me is one of the most incredible things in my life, seeing a 97-year-old lady put her faith in Jesus. Hey, Miss Betty, you remember when I baptized you at 97 years old? She's not going to forget that, is she? I'm not going to forget that when I get to heaven. We want to retain our memories. Our memory is basic to our personality. They are who we are. I don't want to lose that stuff when I get to heaven. But on the other side of that, there's some things that I would just as soon forget when I get to heaven, right? There's things that I want to forget right now that I can't. I especially don't want to remember in heaven. I don't want to bump into somebody in heaven and think, I remember when they stabbed me in the back. I remember when that person lied to me. Worse, I don't want to remember my own shortcomings for all eternity. I remember when I stabbed that person in the back. I remember when I lied to that person. I don't want to live with bad memories for all of eternity, do you? I just as soon forget these things. Worse, I don't want to spend all eternity with the knowledge of a person who did not make it to heaven. To always look around and remember that loved one, that friend of mine that was cast into the lake of fire. And to spend all of eternity missing that person and dwelling on that. Or having regret, I should have been a better witness. I should have done more to tell that person about Jesus. So we see this struggle. On the one hand, we want our memories to make it into heaven. But on the other, at times it would be nice if God could just wipe our memory clean and give us a blank slate when we get to heaven. So to what extent are we going to remember things in heaven from earth? I think the most important reason that we will retain our memories in heaven is so that we will appreciate our salvation. As much as I don't want to remember being a failure and a sinner when I get to heaven, that's what's going to make me appreciate God's amazing grace. It's going to dawn on me that I was a depraved sinner deserving of hell, but God in His grace reached down and saved me when I did not deserve it. Oh, I didn't earn it. I'm going to remember that God gave me that free gift because God so loved the world that I'm going to remember that He sent Jesus to die for me. And I'm going to remember the weight of my own sin, how it separated me from God, and I'm going to remember that relief experience when God removed that burden from me. I want to retain that for all of eternity, and I believe that we will. So how do we balance this? Keeping our memory, but wanting to lose some of our memory. Randy Alcorn wrote it like this. He said, memory is a basic element of personality. If we are truly ourselves in heaven, there must be a continuity of memory from earth to heaven. We will not be different people, but the same people, marvelously relocated and transformed. Heaven cleanses us, but it does not revise or extinguish our origins or our history. I believe in heaven we're going to be able to retain those good memories and keep them at the forefront of our minds. But what about those bad memories? I don't believe that God takes them away. But I do believe this. Isaiah 65 and verse 17. This might be the key to understanding our memory in heaven. Isaiah 65:17, speaking of that future day, it says, "The former things shall not be remembered, nor come to mind." They shall not be remembered or come to mind. When we use the word remember, oftentimes that means that we forgot. Oh, I just remembered. But when the Bible uses the word remember, when God speaks of remembering, it's not about forgetting. It's about having something in the front of your mind. In the book of Genesis, when Noah was on the ark and his family of 8, the Bible says that when the flood waters subsided, it says, then God remembered Noah. God didn't just say, oh, shoot, that's right, Noah's on the ark. I got to get him off of that thing. When it says he remembered, it doesn't mean that he first forgot. To God, remembering means that he keeps it right here in the front of his mind. God never forgot about Noah while he was on the ark. In the same way, the Bible says that God chooses not to remember our sin. God does not develop divine amnesia when he forgives us of our sin, to where God forgets. You mean to tell me that you're a sinner? No, God knows that we're sinners, but he does not remember our sin. He does not keep our sin in the forefront of his mind. Of course he knows that we are sinful people, but he does not deal with us according to our sin. So here's how I think this applies to our memory. When Isaiah says, these former things will not be remembered by us, we are not going to lose the recollection of the fact that we were once sinners, that people let us down and hurt us. We're not going to forget that, but we're not going to live in light of that either. If you let me down on earth, I'm not going to spend all of heaven resenting you for that, and I'm going to be glad that you're not going to spend all of heaven remembering when I wasn't there for you. We will not remember those things. We will finally have the ability to forgive and forget, something we really only pay lip service to down here, right? Forgive and forget. We might forgive, but we can't forget, not on purpose, but in heaven we'll be able to. I forgave it and I've forgotten it. It might somehow be in the back of my mind if I were to fish around for it, but I'm not living in light of that. To put it another way, St. Augustine said it like this. In his classic book, The City of God, describing heaven, St. Augustine said, the memory of our previous memories will be a matter of purely mental contemplation with no renewal of any feelings connected with those experiences. In other words, yeah, we're all going to remember that we messed up and that we were sinners, but it's not going to bring up old feelings. I'm not going to have feelings of resent or anger or jealousy when I bump into you in heaven. As a mental contemplation, it might be there in the back of my mind, but it's not going to renew those feelings that it brought up on earth. We will truly live as if the offense never occurred. Johnny Erickson Tada said that our bad memories will not be erased so much as eclipsed. Think about that. They're not going to be erased so much as they are eclipsed. You know, the stars never go away. You can go out today when church gets out and look up in the sky and not see the stars you saw last night. They were not erased. They have been eclipsed by the rising of the sun. The stars are right where we left them last night, but they are far outshone by the sun. In the same way, our old memories are not going to go away, but they're going to be eclipsed. We're going to have better things to think about, remembering the good times and developing new memories, and we're not going to be worried about those old bad memories. A third question today, kind of similar to that, is will I know everything in heaven? Now, we've already talked about will we remember each other? Will we have relationships with each other? And I believe that we do. We will. But are we going to know everything? What I mean by this is a question of omniscience. When we get our glorified bodies, is God going to take these brains and fill them with every fact in the universe and then stick them inside our new heads? Quick, who invented sliced bread? Anybody know? You might not know it now, but you're going to know it in heaven. As soon as God gives you this glorified body, you'll be like a Jeopardy master. You'll know everything there ever is to know. I don't believe it works like that. I don't believe that God is going to give us brains fully loaded with every fact that there's ever been. But I believe that we will spend eternity learning these things, getting to know these things. So the thing is, God is not going to give us fully loaded brains, but he's going to give us brains that can learn and then never forget. So we could say it like this: in heaven we will learn, but never relearn. Not going to be subject to memory loss. In heaven, you might meet the person that invented sliced bread, and then you'll never forget that person again. You'll never forget that detail again. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 12, Paul said, "For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known." I used that verse a couple of weeks ago to talk about our relationships with each other. We will know each other, and people will know us. But that means that we will get to know each other, and we will get to know other things. The word know in the Greek language, it implies learning by experience. It's not something where these new brains have every fact already in them. It's things that we will get to know as we learn them from all eternity. So I believe that we can bump into people in heaven and we can ask them questions. And then we will learn. We will learn by observation. We will learn by exploration. We will learn by digging and probing. And once we find out something, it's going to be there forever. Could you imagine sitting down in heaven and discussing the Chronicles of Narnia with C.S. Lewis? Anybody ever read those books or watched any of the movies? Could you imagine sitting down with C.S. Lewis himself and saying, "Talk to me about Aslan. When you were crafting that character for Aslan, I want to know what was in your mind, Mr. C.S., when you were writing the Chronicles of Narnia." My favorite characters, Ma and Pa Beaver, the dialogue that you were developing between them to teach the children about Aslan. Did you have any other animals in mind, or did you start off with beavers? How did you settle on beavers for these characters? I want to know these things. And I'm going to find out when I sit down with C.S. Lewis one day in heaven, and I'm going to ask him myself, and I'm going to know these things. Don't you want to find out about the Sistine Chapel by talking to Michelangelo himself? You want to learn how to throw a spiral by asking Tim Tebow himself? You want to find out a good recipe for chicken sandwiches by asking Truett Cathy himself? These people are going to be in heaven, and we can talk to them. We can ask them the questions that have always been on our minds. And if that thought is exciting to you, how much better, church, to sit down and discuss the Bible with Jesus himself. We're going to know these things by getting to know these things. And when you might have to take a number to get to sit at the feet of Jesus, but when it's your turn and you sit down and say, "Jesus, what were you feeling in the Garden of Gethsemane? Sweating drops of blood? What was on your mind, Jesus? Hey, Jesus, what was it like when you rode on that donkey and they were shouting Hosanna? That should have made you feel good, but you knew in a couple of days they were going to be shouting Crucify. What was it like to ride that donkey through the streets? Jesus, when you were walking on the water, what was going through your mind? Did you look down and see the fish that you had created? Or were you focused on the disciples that you had created? Oh, these questions that we can ask Jesus about the crucifixion, about walking out of the tomb, about having his feet anointed with perfume and washed with hair. Man, so many questions there will be to ask, and we'll have all of eternity to learn these things, to get to know these things. So I'm glad that God is not going to give us fully loaded brains, but he will give us the capacity to learn through experience. Martin Luther once said, "If given the choice between knowing everything there ever is to know and learning everything there ever is to know, I would choose the latter every time." So much better that way. The joy of learning and coming to know these things. Consider Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 7. After saying that God has raised us up to the heavenly places, Paul said that Jesus will show us the incomparable riches of his grace in the coming age. Jesus has a lot of things to show us. The incomparable riches. He will reveal to us is what that phrase means. He has things that we can't know down here yet, but he will reveal to us in the days ahead. Jesus is going to teach us things that we don't even know that we don't even know. Sometimes we might think we've got it all figured out down here, and Jesus has things that he's going to reveal to us in the days ahead. I can imagine Jesus taking me by the hand and saying, "Hey, I want to show you all 10 planets in the Milky Way." Say, 10 planets, Jesus? There was only 9 when I was a kid, and then Pluto wasn't, and now it is again, but I got 9. And Jesus says, "Trust me, there's 10. I want to show them all to you." He's going to show us things that we don't even know that we don't know yet. We think we've got it all figured out. Over the years, scientists have numbered the stars. At one point, they knew that there was like 5,000 stars. Now it's in the billions upon billions upon billions. Well, that might be trillions upon trillions for all we know. And Jesus is going to reveal these things to us. And we don't even know that we don't know them. Imagine what things he has in store for us. If he's shown us this much in our limited, finite state, it blows my mind to think about what secrets he's revealed for eternity. Another question. This is an important question. It's an emotional question. But number 4 this morning, do people in heaven look down on us? Are they really watching over us? Have you ever heard this? Well, don't worry, son, grandma's looking over us right now. We know that grandma's watching over us today. And that's a nice thought at times, isn't it? And that idea has made its way into song lyrics, into movies. Books have been written on the topic, and we picture our loved ones lovingly watching over us. Are they doing that, though? To what extent do our loved ones look down from heaven to earth and see what we are up to? Well, I really don't know the answer to that, but I do know that Revelation 5 mentions the martyrs under the altar, and they're crying out to God saying, how much longer until you avenge our death? It was the Antichrist that had killed them. And they're saying, Lord, when are you going to bring judgment upon this person? So somehow in heaven, these people knew that something on earth had not taken place yet, and they were waiting for that to happen. So in some capacity, people in heaven have an understanding of things that are taking place on earth. But how much understanding do they have? Now this I don't know. Are they watching over us right now? I don't fully know the answer to this, but I think a better question might be, do they want to watch over us? If given the choice between exploring heaven or watching earth, which would you choose? For many of us, we say, I've had all the earth I can handle. When it's my time to leave earth and go to heaven, I'm done with that planet, and I'm going to spend my time exploring heaven. I've got galaxies waiting for me. I've got a Savior that I want to worship. I don't want to look down on earth. I've got better things to do with my time. Can they see us? Maybe. Do they want to see us? Now that I don't know. I hear people say things, they're watching their funeral service right now and they're seeing all these nice things that were said about them. That's the last thing I want to do when I go to heaven is peer down from the clouds and watch my funeral. That seems kind of odd, doesn't it? Do you really think I want to see people crying over me and not be able to do anything about it? I picture my wife or my children crying. To me, the most torturous thing I can imagine is to watch them cry and not be able to go down and give them a hug, to not be able to console them. What person in their right mind wants to watch their funeral, see people cry over them and say, well, that was nice, Lord. Thank you for letting me get to watch that today. That'd be the last thing I want to see. Unless a person's an incredible narcissist, which that won't make it into heaven, nobody's going to want to watch their own funeral. If you do, don't tell me, because I think that's strange. But I'm going to have more important things to worry about than to watch people cry and grieve over me. Do we want people in heaven to look down at this earth and see crime? Do you think they want to look down with this new view of heaven and say, oh, look, there's murder right there. Oh, look, there's a rape taking place. Look at all this racism and injustice. They don't want to see that stuff. They want to leave this world behind. I can't imagine they would want to just peer down from heaven and look at earth all the time. That'd be the last thing that I would want to do. Also think about it like this. Do we really want them watching us? To what extent do we want them watching us? Okay, Mom, I'm about to get in the shower now. If you could not look for a few minutes, that would be great. I'll yell when I'm finished. I mean, do we really want them watching over us all the time? And what good could they do watching over us anyway? They're not our guardian angels. They don't, to the best of my knowledge, have any power to protect us or intervene or stop anything. They would be spectators, helpless spectators at best, and I don't think they would want that. A powerless feeling, not being able to stop something you can see happening. To look down from heaven and see us struggling in the hospital when we're sick, or to see us crying when our hearts are broken, they're not going to want to do that, and I wouldn't want that for them. It's nice to think our loved ones are watching over us, but I don't want that for them. I want them to be free from anything earth-related. Your time on earth is finished. You ran your race. Now please go enjoy heaven. I'll see you when I get there. But don't worry about me anymore. I don't really want them watching over us for their own benefit. But I do believe, according to Luke 15, that Jesus said that there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels whenever a sinner repents. The angels are aware when somebody gets saved, they start going crazy. I mean, they start acting like their team won the Super Bowl. They're high-fiving and cheering and clapping. And I bet the people in heaven say, who got saved today? Who got saved today? And I believe that they get to find out and rejoice over these things. But here's what I do believe. Without being able to point at a Bible verse to prove it, I just have this thought in my mind that from time to time, the Lord will pull somebody over and say, hey, I want to tell you about something that's happening on earth right now. Hey, John, come here for a second, John. I know you didn't live long enough to walk your daughter down the aisle, but John, today's her wedding day. Would you look at her in that white dress? John, isn't she beautiful? I believe God would do things like that for the people that are in heaven. Hey, John, I know when you died, your granddaughter was pregnant, and you didn't get to see the baby, but John, guess what? It's a boy. Hey, John, they're both healthy, and guess what? They named him after you, John. Wouldn't that be so cool? Hey, John, I know you were praying for your wife to get saved all those years. You hear the angels celebrating right now, John, you'll never believe what just happened. Hey, John, your wife got saved, and she'll be here before you know it. I believe that's the kind of thing that God will do, to make us aware of the things, the good things that are on earth. Not that they're watching over us all the time, but that in his love and mercy, God allows them to experience that. Now let's close our series with this vitally important question. The question that we must end this series with. We began with the question, is heaven even real? But let us end with this question on the opposite side. Is it really happily ever after? Oh, heaven sounds happy, but is it really happily ever after? Does it really go on forever? Can anything mess it up? After all, Adam and Eve had it made, didn't they? They lived in a perfect place, and then they blew it. Can we blow it? One day in heaven, am I going to be the one that ruins it for everybody? Is Satan going to come up to me and say, the Lord said you can't eat cheesecake, but hey, guess what? You will not surely die. Try this cheesecake. And then I'm going to be weak, and I'm going to be tempted, and I'm going to give in. Do we have any assurance from the Bible that we are not going to mess it up in the way that Adam and Eve messed it up? Well, I believe that we do. I believe heaven is truly happily ever after. I invite you to Revelation chapter 22 before we close today. If you're wondering if I was ever going to open this Bible I've been carrying, I've been saving it the best for last. I want us to look at these verses together. Revelation 22 and then back to 21. One of the most important verses in the Bible is Revelation 22:3. And it says this, no longer will there be anything accursed, but the throne of God and of the Lamb will be in it, and his servants will worship him. In context, it's talking about that new city, the new Jerusalem, when heaven comes down to earth. We've talked about that. But there will be no more curse. The first Sunday after the pandemic began, I preached about this topic, and you've heard me say this so many times, that every bad thing that has ever happened to any person in the history of the human race, every bad thing that's ever happened is because of the curse. Death is because of sin. Sickness is because of sin. Sorrow is because of sin. Tears are shed because of sin, and that is all part of the curse. And then Revelation 22:3 says, but there will be no more curse. The curse will be broken. You know why we like those fairy tales where they all live happily ever after, where Prince Charming comes in with true love's kiss, or where the knight slays the dragon? We love these stories because they all end by saying the curse is broken. And I was telling that to somebody one time. They said, you know, the Bible just kind of sounds like it's just a nursery rhyme, a fairy tale. I said, that's because all the fairy tales are based off the good news at the end of the Bible. This came first, this promise that the curse would be broken. And we love this story, and every children's story thereafter has been crafted around this same concept, that everything was good, then a bad guy came and ruined it, then a hero came and saved the day, then the curse was broken, and they all lived happily ever after. The most important verse in the Bible, in my mind, for those of us that have been saved, is that one day we will live in a place with no more curse. If we were to back up a chapter 21, look in verse 4. It says, he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore. Why? For the former things have passed away. These former things have passed away. What an incredible thought that is. Crying, dying, they've passed away. We have the promise that death itself will cease. Nothing will die anymore. Well, what is death? but the wages of sin. If there will never be another death, does it not stand to reason that it is because there will never be another sin? If no one sins, nothing can die, and that will be heaven on earth. That is the breaking of the curse instituted all the way back in Genesis chapter 3. And now to me, a verse that we must close this series with. Back to chapter 21, still in chapter 21, verse 27. Verse 27 says, "But nothing unclean will ever enter that city, nor anyone who does what is detestable or false, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life." Did you see that? Nothing unclean will ever enter that city. Never. That tells us that there will never be another serpent. There will never be another forbidden fruit. There will never be another temptation. There will never be another sin. There will never be another moment of weakness. There will never be another failure. There will never be another curse. There will never be an undoing of this beautiful place that God will prepare. Ever. We have this promise that it is happily ever after. It will go on forever and ever. In Luke 20, Jesus said of those in the eternal state that they cannot die anymore. When describing the rapture in 1 Thessalonians 4, Paul says that we will ever be with the Lord. There are no conditions in these two promises. It does not say that no one can die anymore if they don't sin. Paul does not say we will ever be with the Lord if we remain sinless. No, we have these promises that no one will die. We will always be with the Lord because nothing unclean will ever enter that city. We will never sin. We will never mess it up. You might say, well, Adam and Eve had it perfect and they messed it up. Here's the difference between us in the future and Adam and Eve in the past. Adam and Eve were created uncorrupted, but our glorified bodies will be made incorruptible. And there's a world of difference between those two words. Adam and Eve were uncorrupted, but they were corruptible. They had the capacity to sin, and they did. We will be made both uncorrupted and incorruptible. We will not have the capacity to sin. Answer this question: can God sin? Can God sin? No. Why not? Because he is perfectly holy, and in that condition, you and I will be perfectly holy. We will never sin for the same reason that God cannot sin. It will not be in our nature to do so. God is incorruptible, and in 1 Corinthians 15, Paul says that we will exchange these mortal bodies for those which are immortal, and we will exchange these corruptible bodies for ones which are incorruptible. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not equating us to God and saying we will ever achieve his level of holiness, but we will be incorruptible and incapable of sinning. For all of eternity, the option to sin will be off the table, and nothing unclean will ever enter that city. My prayer is that this series on heaven has encouraged you as Christians to be more heavenly minded than we are earthly minded, to set our minds on things above rather than things on earth, to be encouraged as we remember our loved ones that are there, and to make sure that we are busy inviting other people so that they may join us. But I want to close with a quote from the great Charles Spurgeon, and then we'll be finished. The old Prince of Preachers said these words about the day that he would go to heaven. He says, of heaven, he says, "To come to thee is to come home from exile, to come to land out of a raging storm, to come to the rest after long labor, to come to the goal of my desires and the summit of my wishes." Yes, when we finally arrive at heaven, it will be the culmination of everything we have ever looked forward to, but it is a promise that is only for those who have been saved by God's grace. So I am going to this heaven of happily ever after. But what about you? Will I see you there? Will you join me too? Do you know beyond any shadow of a doubt that heaven would be your home if you died? After hearing all these things about heaven over these last few weeks, why would you leave saying, boy, I hope I get to go there someday? If you don't know that you know that you know that you know that heaven will be your home, don't leave this place today until you're saved. If you are watching us from home today, don't do another thing until you send a message to the Facebook page that you're watching, or you send a text message to us and say, I need to be saved, and we will get in touch with you. If you need to be saved in this room today, though, don't leave here until you do. I'm going to invite you to please stand to your feet across this building as Miss Nancy comes. Thank you once again for tuning in to our live broadcast here at Putman Baptist Church. As always, we appreciate you being a part of our service from wherever you choose to watch. But we want to let you know that if you should ever have any questions about what you've heard in the morning's message, or questions about how to be saved, to know whether or not you're going to go to heaven one day, or you'd like prayer or anything else, we would love to hear from you. Just because you're not here in the building doesn't mean that you're not still part of this fellowship. So please, feel free to give us a call. You can reach me on my cell phone at 426-3706, or you can call the church office, or send us a message right here on the church Facebook page, and somebody will get in touch with you very soon. Thank you again. God bless you, and hope you have a great day.